already that we can see you. Because yeah, what is this about? This is really, I think, really going to be an interesting and engaging discussion. I'm really looking forward to discuss with the 4 next gens that are on a panel today. I can already see Patrick Knodel, I think, joining us from Stuttgart, Marlene Engelhorn from Vienna, and Julian, Marwitz, and Luisa Redetzki are also just coming on from, I think, from Munich. So what is this panel about? We thought, like, in the audience, probably there will be some next-gen investors, or maybe you're a parent of a next-gen, of a younger generation, or maybe you work in a family office that also like is working to bring in the next generation. And we thought it could be really interesting to hear from you about the motivation for impact investing, or for generally a little bit broader, for actually the motivation and different approaches to changing the status quo that we think the status quo that the world is in right now is not working for our planet and not for us as humans. And important is that not all next gens are different, obviously. They see the world differently, they have different motivations and approaches. And yeah, this is what we want to share with you today, to maybe get inspired of like what these next gens are working on, are pushing for, which experiences they have made. And yeah, maybe there's something that you can also use for your journey or for your conversations with other generations. We truly believe that every investment has an impact. It's just a question if that impact is positive or is negative. I myself, as Renee mentioned, I'm Kristin Siegel. I'm the head of EMEA for toniic. And toniic is a global network of impact investors. We have about 500 members worldwide. They are all either individual, high net wealth individuals, or family offices or foundations. And I personally have been with toniic for 6 years now. You also heard on the first panel from Peter and Julie and Hedda. They mentioned partially their experience, but it's really about bringing like-minded investors to push each other to go further, to go deeper on impact investing, but to also think a little bit broader, think beyond investing. Like, how can we each contribute to have a positive impact? I myself used to be in the financial industry. I was a portfolio manager at different private banks, Julius Baer, BHF Bank, but 6 years ago switched towards impact investing and fully dedicate myself to supporting impact investors on their journey and generally to build up the ecosystem. So much about introductory words from me, but now let's hear from the next gens themselves. And first, I would love to invite Luisa on stage to share with us, like, Luisa, when did you get started with impact investing and why was it so important for you to get into this field?
Hi, Kristin and everyone. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm Luisa Redetzki, and I got introduced to impact investing back in 2017 when I was partaking in a seminar for next gens in finance, and one of the sessions introduced sustainable investing and presented it as this revolutionary approach. And I was surprised. I hadn't heard about it before, but I was just surprised about the presentation because I considered it to be quite obvious and natural. And so that was kind of my beginning of the journey. So I began learning more about it, expanding my knowledge, still continuing to do so today, trying to stay on top of the development of the field and increase and improve my practices through, one, deploying the capital that I have available, two, also through awareness work among either other next gens or advisors of the like.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Luisa. I think I would love to dig in a little bit deeper on that, actually stay with you. Like you mentioned already, like through your personal capital, but also like using your human capital in your work, really focusing on impact investing. Maybe you can share a little bit more like what exactly you're focusing on right now and like what is your contribution there to changing the status quo?
Let me start out with how I first got started. So because I was completely new to it, I kind of took a look at what I had and what I have direct decision-making power over. And so I started out with identifying lowest hanging fruit and then taking baby steps. So applying exclusion criteria on the public portfolio, for example. Then the next step was moving into positive screening, and then making some fund investments where the fund was geared towards positively impactful companies. So now I'm at a point where I'm taking a portfolio approach on my own assets, and then also trying to bring the family along, and also convincing other so-called fence sitters. So people who are interested in impact investing, who have the means to get involved, but are just unsure and have various barriers. So I try to help them or convince them getting involved.
Yes, wonderful. So really, we can see clearly, like you started with yourself, right, on your own portfolio, also trying to bring along the family. And I think we'll dive into that a little bit a little later, also like, what challenges there were on the way. And then, but also beyond that, right, to really bring in others that are beyond your family, but generally like help building the ecosystem. I think that is also a perfect segue maybe to Patrick, to bring you in, bringing along the family. That certainly is one part of your journey. But first of all, maybe do share with us when and how did you get started, and mostly also why did you get started in impact investing?
Yeah, thanks, Kristin. Thanks for the invitation at the beginning to get started. Very, very briefly, I have a classical economic education, and I had a classical target in life, meaning what you want to earn and how successful in careers you want to be. And my father being an entrepreneur, of course, that was quite set. And I started questioning how the world runs and how it works and how we learned at university and in school, and what models we think in when I started traveling the world during my studies. And so I started questioning business and the assumptions behind that. And in 2016, after many also discussions with my father, we decided to set up a foundation that was financed out of his family business in real estate. And then I started, because I was totally new, I didn't have a clue about impact or about NGO. I basically had an understanding of what is wrong in the world, but not how to solve it. So I started running around and talking to many people in NGO sectors and foundations and so on. And so I met people who did impact investing at that stage. And to me, that was in 2017. And to me, that was like a shock, because it's like, it was the first time someone told me, well, you can solve a problem before it even appears and still make money with it. And why is that not standard? And I was like, and then I started talking to other people about that, and they were all totally confused. How can you do something good and earn money with it? And I was like, how can that be such a problem in the mindset? Shouldn't that be the normal thing to do? Why is it normal to damage things while earning money in an investment bank or whatever? And so for me, this was like totally obvious that if you want to really change things in the world, non-profit can always solve some problems if you do it right. But if you really want to change the system, you have to funnel money into good solutions. And if you want to funnel money in a bigger amount, profit has to be there at the end, so you can get more people into the area. So that was how I started off in 2017. And then to make the long story short, and next to the foundation, which is charitable nonprofit, we started a second vehicle, a for-profit investment company that was under the roof of my father's company at the beginning. And then 2 years later, 2020, we split that up, and I'm doing this on my own since then. And currently I have I should know that maybe. I think I have 10 direct ventures and 2 funds at the moment in there. And in the foundation, we have about 20 project partners.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patrick, for sharing that. And maybe on, do you have a specific focus right now, specific region, or a specific impact theme that you're really focusing on, either with your foundation or with your investment vehicle?
I'm trying to find that, Kristin.
Okay.
And I have been trying to find that, and it gets better, but it's still, I mean, maybe the general assumption from my side is that the status quo in the world as it is right now is a problem because because we have very unequal portions of wealth around the world, and that structures down to everything. So decisions are not made for the benefits of common health or in a common sense. They are very much influenced by people who own the wealth, and if we change that, and also for the benefit of the global north and the global west, and not to the benefit of the global south that we have been exploiting for the past 200 years. And if we want to change that, we have to change the mindset first. We have to change the mindset that we do business and that we make decisions here in the global north. So that's one part of the foundation. And the other thing is we have to really enable people in the global south, not only on a fancy website, but really thinking it through. How can we enable people to really help themselves with social business approaches and so on. And so that's what I'm trying to do with the foundation and with the impact investing, with the for-profits. It's like I have investments in North America, in Europe, and in Africa. And I think in Africa, for instance, you can get to a higher impact much faster, because if you want to increase living standards, for example, this is much easier to do in the countryside in Mali than in downtown Stuttgart, where I live. You can do that much easier, but you have to be a little bit brave maybe to do it. But I'm a fan of seeing the chances in the global south and not only the risks. And the second thing is, maybe from a topics point of view, I think the whole circular economy approach is what I like. People always talk about climate, and okay, yes, we can do that, but not all models behind that climate are really sustainable and are really solving problems. And I want to invest in things that really solve problems, that really change industries, and not in platforms that do or don't do like trade with some CO2 certificate or whatever, and don't even take into account methane, for example. So I want to really invest in game changers and in companies that really think different. And I think circular economy approach, reducing plastic, finding new technologies. That's what I'm trying to do. Let me stop there, otherwise it gets too long.
No, but that's fantastic. I think absolutely, really, this investing in game changers, supporting really the change of the system, and like not incremental change, I think is what I'm clearly hearing, and what we'll also talk a little bit more in depth. But I do want to bring in also Julian. Julian, you also have been on the journey for quite a while. So do share with us, like, why did you get started, and like, where are you now in your journey?
Sure, happy to. So in my case, I'm very interested and passionate about nature and environment. So that has been always the case. And I love being outdoors. I have high respect for the nature, about the ecosystems which are existing all around the world. And before COVID, I loved to travel to very remote places as well. And 10 years ago, I already focused mostly on real estate, because that's basically the biggest exposure also from my family background, to reduce energy costs and to have a better impact on the environment, because obviously the building stock is still one of the largest contributor to CO2 emissions. And now it's obviously becoming a big trend, and also embraced by certain standards and regulations. But 10 years ago, it was not such a big topic, and probably was one of the few people who looked into that. And then, similar as to Patrick, went on with practical solutions. So I built apartment blocks in Indonesia or China. At that time, there were already green building standards, which was probably pioneering at that point, and still involved in that topic. So I either invested into venture capital or private equity in some of these companies. So, for example, better building materials, or solutions where you have energy management systems, where you can control your consumption better, and still investing a lot into real estate, which is better performing in that sense, but then also the technology behind. And therefore, it automatically turned into impact. I feel like, especially in our case, we have a bigger responsibility to choose something where we're passionate about and where we can make a change. And I think it's very important in all cases that we understand that responsibility and then funnel it into a certain direction, because we can actually make a bigger change if we want to. And in my case, it's certainly in the environment. And then secondly, also quite recently, I've understood that you can change a lot also through education as well, because this is simply a large gap between people who have not much access to skills. And once you can bridge that gap, very high upsides in general are possible. And that can be also on the health level as well. If someone cannot see, and you can have quite cheap sometimes cataract eye surgery, people can see again, and clearly then they're a valuable contributor to a workforce again, and they can educate themselves better. And basically the education gap there is quite huge, and the impact there is also super interesting, and I love to invest there into solutions which bring better access or even free access to people who are not privileged in that sense, because I feel that's an untapped potential. There are certainly some high potentials in between which we haven't had the access yet, and that's something where basically the whole economy of a certain country or even the whole world can benefit in. So basically these two themes are really something where I'm mostly passionate about it, and I feel it also as a huge responsibility of myself to be engaged in that topic.
Yeah, super. Thank you for sharing that. Really also interesting approach to think about, yeah, what do you care about? And also see like, what do you have agency over, or like where do you can like steer the money a little bit, what is in your portfolio? And one way is like there, the real estate, and seeing like how you can combine those and doing things next to that as well. So yeah, thank you. Obviously, like 3 different approaches. And I said, we do want to share like very different motivations and approaches to you. And then, so I want to bring in Marlene Engelhorn, who also has a very special approach to changing the status quo. So Marlene, like how and why did you get started on your journey, the impact journey?
So, hello everyone. I'm still surprised as to that I got invited and stayed invited. Thank you very much for that opportunity of telling you how I see the world. I got taught the typical messages every young rich kid gets taught that I know. I haven't encountered a young rich kid yet that doesn't get taught these things, and the messages are mainly around justification of privilege and power. And they're usually masked as a responsibility. Responsibility being a good euphemism for power I do not want to return to other people who it might belong to as well, because democracy. And so my choice was to, at the beginning, yes, I want to save the world, of course, because we have so many crises. I'm a crisis woke person, typical saviorism behavior. I ticked all the boxes, I ticked them really, really hard. And then I realized for me that the big old choice that I have to either do it myself and do the impact investing myself and put my own little brand on it, or to have some expert do it for me, doesn't change much about the status quo, really, because changing status quo needs a sort of bravery that is very, very far away from comfort. Most people I know who are in power do not want to shed power and or give up comfort. And so my focus was, okay, maybe I should question some things. And I did get questions from other people questioning my power position, like, you're not born into financial competence just because you inherit money. And I was like, that's kind of true. So maybe I should read up on stuff. And then who makes you put into this position of holding the power over your investing and what it does to other people, to the companies where people work, and then you get the returns because you invested in the fact that they are now allowed to work for your returns. Like, where is that mechanism coming from? Is this a natural thing? I hear this a lot. Naturally, obviously, at the end of the day. Those are typical phrases for status quo. It's like, okay, I have to read into this. I have to figure this out. I haven't figured it out, not even close. I don't have answers. I'm more in the process kind of mindset. I don't have any answers for you, but I will join the talking points and then, be on stage a lot. And I think since everything has impact, that doesn't mean that it justifies the monopoly of agency. And we have decided that we are democratically self-reigned in the global North and global West, mostly at least. We should expand this to the way we do investing. Actually, there's a public fund that started yesterday by the Family Office for Visions, who's actually approaching this, where they go, we should democratize this system and make sure that people get access to this sort of power, not depending on how wealthy they are, because wealth inequality is a huge issue, and it's a self-perpetuating system in capitalism. And that's a description of it. That's not even an analysis. I haven't even analyzed anything yet. I just described the fact that this is hugely problematic, and we need to address this face on. Does it mean discomfort? Oh, hell yes. But it's really important that we face that. Otherwise, this is not impact investing, but perpetuating the status quo. And that's got nothing to do with bravery and nothing to do with solving crises. And usually people immediately affected know very well what they need to do, and they don't need a fancy solution from a techie from the West. They usually just need to be able to be put back in power position to figure it out themselves in a way that is sustainable for their community. So this is my approach in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Marlene, for sharing that. Because I think that is also a topic that a lot of impact investors are thinking about. Like really this wealth inequality, how can we get more democracy within our world, and like also this agency problem that you mentioned. There are some thoughts also around that in impact investing. And I know, for example, Patrick, I know you're also working, for example, with the Purpose Foundation, I think, and on their approach and supporting them. So maybe can you share a little bit your thoughts around how to approach that topic of redistributing the agency and the stewardship of money?
Oh, that's a huge topic. I mean, there are several things you can do to get close to it. I mean, you mentioned one, steward ownership as a new form of company ownership is one. In German, it's called Verantwortungseigentum. So basically, in the end, the company belongs to itself, and there is not one owner that gets all the profits. But still, also these companies, especially in a younger time when there are startups, they also need foreign investment, because also these companies, in a functioning financial systems, young companies would just go to the bank and get money and then build their company with it and pay the money back. But it's not how it works. You won't get any money from a bank. So you need venture capital. You need either professional investors or high net worth individuals or whoever to give you money to get your company running. And that's the same with steward-owned companies. So that's a big thing. So I invested in those, but the way I invest in those is I will give them money and they will give it back to me at a certain point in time with a certain return, but the return is fixed. So I will not become owner of this company. And if this company will become worth $1 billion in 10 years, I will still get back the money I invested if it's successful, and my interest rate, and that's it, not more. So that's also I mean, you're cutting your own possible interests at a certain point, and this is something that goes in direction of Marlene. I'm still the investor, but I will not own it. The people will not work for me; they will work for themselves. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing is, I think impact investing is a great thing, but I agree with some things that Marlene said. At this point in time, it's pretty much limited to wealthy people, or at least I don't consider myself wealthy, but I have access to capital that I can use to do that. So if you don't have that, you cannot do impact investing. If you go to your local bank and tell them I want to invest in a good thing and get money out of it, they will show you funds, and I mean, it's terrible. Look into those things. They will not create the additionality that Julie and Hedda mentioned this morning. And in the most cases, they're not even close to being green. So there is no option. You have then some platforms that pop up like BetterVest and so on, where you can do small ticket sizes into certain projects. And I think that's the way we have to go. For example, I'm just talking to to people who want to make investments in Africa possible for everyone, so that really people in Africa, entrepreneurs who don't need $100,000, but they need $5,000 to get their business running. How can you invest in them? If you want to do due diligence, fly down there, get a lawyer. You have costs of 10,000 euros for an investment of 5,000, so you will not do it. So you have to democratize that, and you have to maybe use technologies to that. And that's also an approach I'm currently thinking about investing in. So I think we need, apart from the big picture that really changes wealth structures all over the world, we have to make positive, impactful investments doable for everybody, and not only putting your money in the bank or putting it into the stock market, because in the stock market you will only buy a stock from someone else, and even if the company is great, you're just giving someone else money. That's it. So the impact is limited, and these are things I'm trying to change. And of course, Marlene has a point there. I'm also trying to figure out how I can change my own structure perspectively in order to make it less dependent on my personal views and personal decisions. It's also a big thing.
Yeah, thank you. You've touched on a various really interesting aspects, like one, democratization of impact investing in general, that it shouldn't be only for the, like, let's say, very rich to be able to invest, but also for, like, yeah, everybody, ideally. Like some thing you said, like around cash. Like, I think that is a change everybody can make in terms of thinking, where do we actually have our cash? Which bank does it lie? Do we know what the bank does with our money at night? Like, where does your money sleep? There are some options like GLS Bank, Ethik Bank, Triodos that are only lending money to sustainable companies. So that's, for example, one change everybody can do. And then also what you alluded to is in terms of, like, yeah, do we actually have access to the capital? That, especially for next gens, is probably also a topic. Like, what can we already do, but maybe we do not have, like, yet that access over the capital, or maybe we don't even have the capital. But what we all do have is a voice, and, like, to bring in others on our journey. And one way also, like, to bring others in is, like, really using this public stage, but also with our family. And I know, like, mostly bringing in our family is, like, a super difficult and sensitive topic. But I know, Luisa, that you started on that journey also for your structure, to put actually some structure in place around impact investing. Maybe can you share some experience from that maybe also would be helpful for others who are in that situation right now, and maybe, yeah, something they could get started on?
Yeah, sure. That's also a big topic. So I'll try to be concise. Pull me back in if I get distracted. So, as I said earlier, when I first got into it, or introduced to impact investing, I then asked my family if we were involved in any activities that could qualify as such, and the answer was no. So I asked why not, and they couldn't really give me a good answer. And I think it was just because, you know, maybe humans are resistant to change. Maybe the advisors hadn't suggested it to them. I don't know. So what I did first was look at what I have direct decision-making power over, and start changing things there. And that then also included a definition of impact for myself. What do I consider to be positive impact in terms of impact investing? There is no one definition, also not in research. And then also for impact investors, specifically for individual impact investors, this can be very individual and can vary greatly. So that's what I did for myself. And then once I had started changing things and felt confident about it, also in terms of education, what you mentioned earlier, Julian, I think education is extremely empowering if it's access to primary or secondary schooling, or if it's, you know, education about impact investing. It kind of changes, once you know more about a topic, it changes your resistance to it. And so I started kind of involving my family in the conversation of impact investing, and then used my own my own portfolio kind of as a showcase to say, look, here are different things that you can do. They work, and why don't we start doing these on a larger scale? And then some family members were really willing to do that and kind of said, okay, let me just copy whatever you're doing because I don't want to be that involved, or I can't be for various reasons. And then there are also some who are more resistant. And yeah, that's the different personalities and different fronts I'm currently engaged on.
Yeah, thank you, Luisa. Really just sharing that. It's really what you're saying, like we start by ourselves, right? Becoming really clear about also our definition, and then like, yeah, slowly, step by step, trying to bring other investors in. And thank you. I already see like a few questions also coming through the chat. Please, if you have a question for the panel, I think I could go on myself and ask a lot, but obviously we also want to hear yours. But maybe before I touch on one of the questions in the chat, maybe Julian, how was your experience with your family? Were they all on board from the beginning, or were there some that you needed a little bit, or maybe you together with other siblings to get them on the impact journey?
Yeah, definitely that was not an easy one at the beginning, because it was something which I did on my own first. I started some few of the initiatives, sometimes just from my own access to capital, and then I expanded it towards the family as well. But clearly there are different views behind. I think again, as a next generation, you have to find your own way in that sense as well, and focus really on something where you are passionate about, where you want to make a difference, and then also convince the others. And I think that's in general, also alluding to the discussion before, a little bit problematic. I always find you have to find a solution where you can convince everyone or the majority, because, and that's ideally a new idea where you can beat the economy with its own weapons. So for example, in my case, environment was the strongest focus, but then I found out there are solutions for helping the environment, plus they're profitable. And then obviously you can sell it to people who are not even caring about the environment at all, but you can actually then drive change. I think the redistribution of wealth in general is not an easy one, because you will find, clearly stated as well, a lot of defense against that. And I think you have to be very clever how to overcome these challenges. And this is true for every topic. I'm not involved in that, but I can just share it from my experience with the environment. It has to be ideally a win-win situation for everyone, and especially in that topic, that's probably not the easiest, because you have to demonstrate that you redistribute also in a sensible way, and I think that's the hardest challenge. If there is a structure in place where it's absolutely comprehensible, then you would probably also convince more people. If it's just about distributing in general, I think that's a hard one. So, and again, turning it back to the family, that's the internal defense then. It's also about convincing them in the right way. And in my case, like, some of the projects really were successful. So at some point they realized this is a topic where you can integrate it also into your existing system, and was quite happy that I could convince more, and now we're having much more focus on that theme in general.
Great. So you really went down the avenue of like leading by example, right? Doing some projects that work out really well, and then also like showing it like to your family that this can really work and can also be profitable, as you say. Very smart way to do that. Thank you. Then I do want to get to one of the questions from Sarah around democratization of impact investing, and that regulations can be a problem. And I know, Marlene, you were also fighting against some regulations that are around wealth distribution, or also like, get wealth to the next generation. Maybe you can share with us, like, what was your experience so far in that, let's call it, fight?
I do not know if I'm cut out to answer the question in the chat, so I'll just say that I am not and leave it at that, and jump to the question you asked with this beautiful little bridge you made. Because I'm advocating for tax justice, for those who don't know that yet, very loudly as much as I can, because I think something that just came up two things came up with what Julian said. One was profit in order to lure the so-called fat cats in who don't care but have the power. And the other thing was redistribution. And I think, why? Why use profit? Why leave them in power? Why leave people who don't care about climate crises, etc., in power? Why not consider that wealth at a certain stage that is not defined, because science and wealth, research about wealth is not exactly something that wealthy people want, so it's lacking, to say the least. Why not say, okay, this can be truly harmful when it exceeds a certain amount that is not fixed, and everybody can fight about it. Some say 10 million, some say if you're not entering 3 digits in the millions, you're not talking rich people. Let's discuss. Why not say that if you exceed that, you should give it up? Because it's something that belongs to everyone, because it comes from everyone, because society always is paying for what you get, always. There's not one single case of self-made, it doesn't exist. And I think that's the thing. It's not comfortable if you're in a power position to say, let's share power, let's return power to those who have been excluded structurally from it and from the decision-making processes as that. There is no reason this should stay in families. There is no reason this should stay in the global north or in the global west. But to give it up also means to give up decision-making power. And for most people, this is an unbearable thought, that they don't get to tell other people how to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons I want to advocate for tax justice so much, because it puts wealth back in the power of democratic, transparent, and public decision-making processes. Parliament, which should be representative of the population. And we should, in economy, serve people and not the other way around. And Angela Merkel said that democracies should be conformed to markets, and I think it should be the other way around. And we need to twist this back to where it's supposed to be. And if this means discomfort, and if this means struggle and fighting, fair enough, but I think it's high time that we get to it. And I think it needs political analysis for all of this. For a future of economy, for a sustainable economy, you need political analysis. You can't stay with purely profit-based analysis of things. We need to question who gets to decide and why, and whether this is legitimate or not, because unless you have a mandate, it isn't. And that means we have a neo-feudal system, and that is highly problematic. It's an elite oligarchy, quote from Michael Hartman, and something that you can actually tell very, very easily. If you have rich people from the West, you call them super rich. And when they're from the East, say Russia, they're called oligarchs, and we don't want them. But it's the same power problem. And we have to take off this lens of saying that the West knows best, because it doesn't. Maybe inside the West and in a little fraction, maybe New Yorkers know very well what to do in New York, but maybe not in South Africa or in Indonesia. Maybe they just don't. Maybe they just should cede that power.
Yes, I personally very agree with that. Like, you're like us, or like, yeah, in the global north or in the global thinking of like, okay, we know exactly, what's the right thing for somebody in the global south, for example, without really bringing them in. Coming back to this, agency problem, or really like, putting the power back into the hand of the people on the ground. But staying on this, your approach, like how, what were the reactions so far? And like, have you found an, way to, I don't know, make people, I don't know, like buy in to your thoughts, be it politicians or maybe also others, or what were the reactions so far?
You mean me?
What has worked? Yeah, you, Marlene. Okay.
Well, I'm in a very, very privileged position. First, little jump to Peter's question, the curiosity question he has. I don't believe in governments necessarily because they are not representative as they should be. I believe in people in society. And that brings me to what you just asked, Kristin, which is that my privileged position is that I'm putting myself next to the majority. There's polls in over 11 countries right now already, newly issued in 2020, and there have been polls before that. There's even studies in Austria since 2009 that people in a majority of 2/3 of the population are in favor of wealth taxes. So it's not like this is not a thing. And this fight has been going on for like decades. I'm just like joining that bandwagon kind of deal. To use a phrase I can't properly use, but I really wanted to say bandwagon because it sounded nice. So it's not my idea. I'm not coming up with anything new. There is no new analysis to this. The fact that wealth and power go together, everybody knows it. It's called the golden rule. Who has the gold makes the rule. And we don't have to stay that way. We just don't have to. And I recently divided a cake on TV twice. And I showed that in Austria, the top 20% get almost 8 pieces. Why? Why? Out of 10 pieces, not 8 out of a gazillion pieces. 8 out of 20, out of 10, 20% of the population. Why? It makes no sense. There is no reason. Nobody can give me an answer to that. And I think if you let society discuss this, and if you let people actually engage the question of how we distribute wealth, and in Austria, it's 1% owning 40%. That has nothing to do with good distribution. This is a lack of quality that is just major. Come on, somebody can't count here. Yeah, let's face it. And those people are in financial power, mind you. Yeah, no, just no. You have to have some trust in society because you owe it more than you know. That's a status quo that is very invisible to most people. Just because there is a government doesn't mean it's a good government. And that's one of the reasons we have checks and balances. And that's why democracy is not autocracy. That's why we divide power, and that's why we have the media looking at governments in a way we don't look at anything else, which makes us know so much bad things about governments that we don't know about anything else because nobody looks there. But there we look. So we get to know and we get to decide. And the state is not the same as the government, is not the same as the society. You can't, because they're being used synonymously in a way that makes absolutely no sense. So I don't have to convince anyone. Everybody is already very, very much convinced, 2/3 of the population, that usually is enough in parliament to change a constitution, just saying. I think what we need is political will. And for that, I'm very happy to use my personal example. I'm inheriting a large sum of money. I have nothing to show for, nothing. I don't even have a degree. I get invited to every panel. Everybody listens to me because I'm a rich kid. I have absolutely no competence, no qualification, but a very, very huge mouth. I like to use it.
That's it. That's like, we can use our voice, and like our, capital is not only our financial capital, but very much our human capital, our voice, potentially also political capital. If we, have some influence there, as you're saying, like it's also about changing political will. And I think we are very much like really in this systemic change conversation, and everybody here on the screen or on the panel really does care. And yeah, I would love to invite, Patrick, Julian, and Luisa. Julian, you unmuted. Do you have a immediate reaction or want to, add something to that, or like what you've seen, like what has worked for you?
Yeah, sure. Maybe to react a little bit on that. In my case, I don't trust the people, unfortunately. I do agree actually in terms of the idealistic view, and I believe it is also possible with other animal races. So if you look, for example, into ants, it has worked out. So they are all building towards a common goal. There's no one who is putting higher than someone else. I mean, there's the queen, but everyone is working towards the queen. So that political system is working, but it's only working if there's not like the human intelligence involved. And I think in the end, that will always contradict the system, because we had also political systems who tried something similar out. It didn't work out. In the end, you always have individuals who will try to get a personal benefit. And personally, if you would even give the power to all the people, I don't believe that in the end, like you would have this ideal system. The only chance I can see, and that comes down to education, is to empower more people through education. Because if you would give now the power to everyone, you would give power also to someone who is completely uneducated, and you might be surprised what kind of reaction will result into. It's not necessarily meaning that education is leading to the best solution, but at least like you have more access to better opportunities. And I believe that would be the only way how to strengthen that. But just the pure redistribution, in my mind, would lead to someone taking advantage of that new system. And that has been the case in the history for a long time, that people wanted to change it a lot. There was the French Revolution, there was the communism. In the end, there were always individual people who took advantage of that system again. And to prevent that, I think the only case could be education. And again, maybe our race is not ready for that, but that's my personal opinion.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else has a reaction? I don't want to take too much of the stage.
Luisa, you want or? Oh. I can see both points here. It's, I mean, we're attending a topic now that is, who said it this morning? I think it was Hedda. She has an opinion on everything. I would say that about myself too, but this one is really tricky because I also it depends on what view of humanity you have and what you set as being normal or natural, and you can start with Rousseau versus Thomas Hobbes and so on. But I also believe that people in generally are good, and they behave in a certain way that is pushed upon them by their surroundings. And if the surrounding structure is great and empowers everyone, then I believe that people in the mass will also behave in a good way. The question is how to get there. And I think this is the point where maybe Julian and Marlene are not on the same spot, and I'm maybe a little bit more with Julian on this one, because I think the systems that are there at this moment in time, they don't allow that radical change, because the people who are in power and use their power will always prevent exactly this from happening, because what you will read in the media is controlled by very, very few people. The big tech companies that we also all post in LinkedIn and Facebook and all of them, they censor unpopular opinions and really open discussion in a very wide range of society. It's very, very difficult because a very open mindset is not there. And this brings me to education, what Julian mentioned. I mean, education is a big part of what we try to support with our foundation, but what does education mean? I mean, in most parts of the world, the former colonialists, they used the education system to keep the people down and to make them dependent on the people who run them. And now that same education place 50 years system is still in place 50 years later. So when I look at education, and Julian, I know that you also do, we try to find things that break up with this. But that means education can also be a pretty bad thing, because it can just brainwash people. So I'm totally with Marlene's ideology. I'm just not seeing the way to achieve that ultimate goal, which is why I decided to take little steps towards the right direction. Maybe that's something general on that.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Patrick, for sharing that. And wow, we are like really deep in a juicy conversation, and I'd love to continue that for probably 2 more hours, or like it has to be continued. Unfortunately, not today, because I'm looking at the organizers and they're telling me like I have 1 minute left. So I very much enjoyed this conversation. And as I said, like this is really a conversation to continue. I think important to take away from today is like, here are like 4 or 5 next gens really thinking about how can we each use our voice, our capital, our financial capital, human capital to help change the system. Think through what is the status quo right now, and like how can we actually change that status quo. And there are different approaches. We don't all agree on how we can do it, but the important piece is we each or one of us are thinking about it, are trying to contribute our part to changing the status quo. Because I know we have like a few next gens and also people who are working with next gens in the audience, I would love to leave you with some actionable steps, maybe some recommendation from our next gens here on the panel, what you would recommend somebody, to get started, something that worked really well, maybe a little hack in a conversation or something that, is, helpful. Because I personally believe the perfect is the enemy of the good. Let's get us started somewhere and learn along the way and help each other on the way. So I would love to hear maybe very briefly from each one of you, what would be your recommendation? And we can do it popcorn style. Okay, Patrick, you look like you want to say something. Why don't you go first?
Oh, I'm just looking. I'm always the first one. I don't want to be that, but someone has to start. Okay, so maybe just one sentence. I'm also the person who really just speaks out what he thinks. And I think that's generally a good thing. But if you want to change things, you have to really, you have to really adapt, and you have to really see where the other one stands, and you have to be more empathetic. Oh, what's that in English? Empathetic? Is that true?
Yep, that's right. Empathetic.
And I think this was a problem on my side at the beginning. Like, okay, now I understood the problem, and here's a solution. Why aren't you on my side? Come on, it's so obvious. Just join me. And I think that's not something you get people on board with. You have to accept that people have a different speed and a different ability to adapt to changes. And I think getting the other one where he is very, very important. So even especially discussions with your parents or uncles or whatever, if you want to change something, don't overrun them, because you will make them your enemy and you will not change anything.
Thank you, Patrick. Luisa, do you maybe want to go next?
Sure, I can go next. I try to take a pragmatic and realistic approach. So for me, that means recognizing the status quo, recognizing what systems that status quo is based on, and recognizing where those systems are broken or inefficient, and then taking steps towards the new ideal, whatever that may look like. We've talked briefly about it just now, and just identifying low-hanging fruits at the beginning. And I think that also, Marlene, you quickly touched upon it at the very beginning. Like, we are all in a very unique situation. We're all privileged, and we all have power, and we should recognize that, and we should decide what to do with that, and to use it for something positive, however that may look like. It can look very differently, but I think the best way is to just get started.
Thank you, Luisa. Maybe Marlene, do you want to go next?
I saw Julian tweet. I think he wants to add something to that.
Okay, one quick, maybe something that worked really well for you that we'd love to give others as a recommendation on their journey.
I posted a link I can recommend, Transformative Investment Principles of Resource Generation. Their slogan is "Inequality ends with our generation." I think to accept the fact that we're all just one person with one voice in a democracy is something that's a relief. And to give up some of the excess power that some of us may hold is a good thing, and helps us figure things out sustainably, because it doesn't recreate power dynamics that we know are harmful. Perpetuating the status quo has nothing to do with changing it, and discomfort should also start with us. And self-reflection, self-critique is something you can't do alone. You need someone who looks in your eye and says, you need to change this, and who keeps telling you, because you won't do it otherwise. Rely on your community.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
And I would end with recommending, if you don't know it yet, trying to find out your personal passion, because that's not only true for impact investing, but for lots of other areas as well. Trying out a lot of different things, also things which might be first uncomfortable for you, or where you're concerned about that it might be dangerous, or whatever it is, but definitely trying out a lot of things and expanding your horizon, investing into your own education. And then at some point you can hopefully feel it for what kind of theme topic you're really engaged in. And then you can be really a change there, because to cause change, you have to be 150% convinced about it. And then you certainly can make it happen. And I think that's definitely important for a lot of people, because at the moment, still a lot of people are influenced by others or by media. And it's very important to concentrate first on yourself, to find out what makes you really happy, and then take the actions to make you even more happy.
Thank you. I think there were a lot of really good recommendations. Certainly starting with ourselves, self-reflecting, bringing others in that help us with that journey, be more empathetic when we are using our voice, right? And hearing also what are the challenges or hurdles for others, find our personal passion, maybe also identifying like low-hanging fruits where we can get started. So wow, this was really an honor for me to moderate this panel. Marlene, Luisa, Julian, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing all your experiences and thoughts. And this conversation is certainly to be continued.